I was thinking we could talk about that, just kind of your perspectives of like that decade, because a lot went on, and then you can kind of pepper in any stories. I mean, we like really covered the '60s and '70s, I think, from like a home life from all the aunts and uncles and those interviews we did. But if there's like anything else from there, like your friends or what you were doing as adults during that time without the kids, if there was such a thing, you can always talk about that too. So yeah, I guess if you're well researched, so I guess just go for it. What do you want to start with?
Well, I remember when Paul said he had 6 pages. I don't have 6 pages, and I don't know what Grandpa has, but I thought I'd start with saying how old the kids were during the between 1960 and 1970. I mainly did the 60s. Steve was age 1 through 10. Therese was age 0 through 9. Mark was age 3 years before he was born till 6. And Paul was 5 years before he was born to 4. And we moved from Saline in '69. So that's about where we started. The 60s were mainly things with the kids starting school, them in middle school. I think they mentioned how important it was to them that they climbed Mount LeConte down in the Smokies, and how they saw the bear and the bear scared them.
Yep.
And then we went to Disneyland a couple of times and did everything under the sun there. We went to every free show that we could find. We didn't have much in the way of money, but we went to every free show I could think of. And we went to see the first one we saw was maybe I can't remember their names or read it. We would go to the planetarium, and we would go to, I can't think of the names of the shows right now, so I'll have to forget that. We went snorkeling down in the Keys, which they enjoyed immensely, and we saw barracudas. Teresa and I were partners, and I don't know who was your partner. But Paul was so little that the waves were bigger than he was. Oh, we went to see Student Prince. We went to see Midsummer Night's Dream. We went to see Picnic. Picnic was at a farm. We went to see Carousel. We went to see 1776. That's the 70s, wasn't it? And that was in Michigan Capitol. If you've ever seen 1776, it sounds boring, but it was very good. And the things that we watched on TV were mainly the space shots. Leonard Bernstein had what were called young people's concerts. And he did a lovely, lovely job of explaining what the music was. And he had the New York Philharmonic play music. And so I'd get the kids all sitting down in front of this little TV that we had, and we'd watch the young people's concerts once a week. There was, since we were down in Saline, which was near Detroit and near Canada, we watched some French shows. So the kids learned a little bit of French. And while they went to my grandfather's funeral, there were so many funerals during those years. The funerals of, well, who do you want to say? Jack Kennedy, our president Kennedy was the most important. Bobby Kennedy.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
so
was like
why don't
funerals.
we you break out each one of those? So like when you talk about John F. Kennedy first, like what him running for president was like. Was he like expected to win? Like what was the campaign like? How did people view him? He obviously is like legendary now, but was he always that way?
Well, those were very exciting times. Number one, I think after Johnson's administration, they were ready for somebody younger. And of course, Kennedy fit that bill. He was also a Catholic, and no Catholic had ever run for the presidency, as far as I know.
He was the first Catholic.
First Catholic president.
It was a big deal.
And now Biden is the second. But there was a lot of discussion, on whether he was going to run the country on the dictates of the Pope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that was laid to rest quite quickly, and there was an awful lot of back when I was growing up, there was a lot of anti-Catholic activity going on, across the cities, and I went to a Catholic school, but some didn't. Some of the Catholics did not. They infiltrated the public school, and everything was fine with them, but there was always a lot of hostility between the public school kids and the Catholic school kids.
mm-hmm.
And
why was that? Why was there tension?
Why was just religious beliefs?
Okay.
And they were parroting. I mean, most kids parroted what the parents were saying,
Sure.
in the house.
I didn't come across that because I lived out in the boonies, and we got bused into high school. And once we were in high school, we just all mixed up, and that there was never that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
In Bay City that I know of. There were probably 6 Catholic high schools in Bay City. Each little church had their own high school, and they'd have maybe a graduation class of 10. And so maybe those of us who were Catholic who went to the public school were just didn't stand out. However, Kennedy ran against Nixon, and they had the first presidential debates on TV.
Mm-hmm.
TV was relatively new, and it was thought that part of the reason that Nixon lost was that he wasn't real clean shaven, and his chin and area looked quite dark on TV, and they thought that. So when he ran again, when he won, he had a lot of makeup on his chin, and
You guys remember watching those debates?
I don't remember much about them.
Mm.
I remember them being there. Do you remember watching them?
Yeah, watching
Kennedy Nixon.
Yeah, the debates, whatnot. Sure. Kennedy came off always came off well.
Yeah.
Nixon was a sweater. He'd sweat, and his black beard would grow as he talked. It seemed like. But that was the first election we voted in, a presidential election.
Both of us.
1958.
We had to be 21.
And then it was always interesting following Kennedy because he was a ladies' man and
He had press conferences and he had an incredible sense of humor.
Mhm.
so
So it was known that he was a philanderer during the time. This wasn't.
well,
I'm not sure.
well, yeah, it wasn't reported like it would have been reported today,
Yeah.
but yes, he was involved with Marilyn Monroe and people knew it.
Mhm.
I didn't know it at the time.
No, I don't think it was well known, Matt.
Yeah.
So when Kennedy got shot, it was horrifying to the nation, just horrifying. And Mark was just a new baby, and I just had a lot of emotional problem with it. Just maybe because I was a new mother, or I don't know what but it was just before Thanksgiving, and for me it was a horrible Thanksgiving.
How did you hear about it?
Well, I heard about it, I guess, on the TV, and as soon as I heard about it, I called Jim at work, and Jim said, well, he knew about it, but he didn't want me to worry or feel bad, so he didn't, immediately call me and let me know.
Yeah. That's probably true, but I have some notion that I was driving right near the gas station by our place in Spillane when that news hit me, or at least I heard the news about it. Maybe that's when they pronounced him dead.
Mhm.
And it was shocking. And of course that filled up the airwaves and all the news of the day. That was always on that. And then
Bobby?
Then of course Bobby got shot 5 years later, and we saw that on TV.
Mhm.
I mean, I think we saw that live when that happened. When all of a sudden he was leaving the podium or mixing with the crowd, and all of a sudden he got downed with a bullet in his belly.
So was he like viewed as kind of basically the same as his brother, like the second chance?
I
Figure that out?
so. No, he was the attorney general for Jack.
Mhm.
And it was like Jack whispered it in the night, it's gonna be Bobby, because that was so unheard of that you had a relative in the administration with you. Civil rights were just beginning to be an issue, and Bobby took that up.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Bobby took up civil rights, and he also took on the mob, which made him kind of a hero in a lot of people's eyes. But that was 1968. Before that, though, and Martin Luther King, when he was shot in 68, wasn't he?
I don't remember what year.
Uh,
It's a wonder he wasn't shot sooner, because he was so active in civil rights, and there were so many activists who were killed. I mean, for instance, one young white man from the US, from the northern Michigan, said, I insist that I'm the first one off the bus, and he got off the bus and they immediately killed him.
Oh, wow.
Beat him to death.
So was Martin Luther King?
They were beating other black students down there in Montgomery and Alabama, and George Wallace was a governor at the time, and he restricted people from entering the university. I mean, he'd stand right there and bash them.
George Wallace handed out baseball bats so that they could beat on any blacks that tried to enter the school. And then he got religion or something, and he was okay in later years.
Mhm.
But it was very, very frightening time, and yet others were up north, we're kind of laughing about, where's so-and-so today? Oh, he's down riding a bus. Meaning riding one of the buses. They had buses of white people, white young college people that went down to demonstrate and help the African American fight for rights.
So was that like a major part of life when that was going on, or was that kind of like a thing that was just kind of happening in the background for you?
It was a big thing.
Well, the whole civil rights movement began in 1960 and went right through the end of the decade.
Yeah.
The decade, and you know, blacks were given the absolute right to vote in 1965.
Not long ago.
But they were given rights. They were given the rights of everybody else back in 1868.
Well, I think the problem in the 60s was that they had poll taxes as a way of limiting the Negro vote, so that they couldn't afford to spend their money on voting.
Right.
I think that was the big thing about that time.
Or I think there was like
1963, there was a big march on Washington for civil rights, and there were a quarter million people participating in that. So there was a lot of heat, you know, along those areas, as well as all the discussion and heat and footage on TV about the Vietnam War.
Well, we haven't done Martin Luther King yet, but early in the 60s, they invented the computer language BASIC. Have you heard of that?
I've heard of Visual Basic.
Well, it's probably another generation, but that was the very first and the basic computer language. And of course, when I was a student at MSU, you'd go into the computer building and you'd have to have these cards, as well as when your dad went. You'd have to have all these big cards, and you'd have to punch type them and then run them, and it would take 24 hours to get anything back from a computer. So that was the invention of BASIC, and then came the moon landings, and then came the Bay of Pigs. Have you heard of the Bay of Pigs?
Yeah, but I mean, let's stick with the moon landing there for a second. So that was a big sports game kind of going on in the background as well, the race to the moon between us and Russia.
Well, we didn't so much think of it as a race with Russia. We just were interested in what we were doing, trying to get to the moon. I'm not even sure that Russia wanted to get to the moon, to be honest. But you know, they were the first people to send anybody up into space. You know, it was just a short trip and not very high, but they were the first. And then they had Sputnik, and then but no, we just watched. We didn't feel like it was a race.
Well,
to me,
personally, we didn't, but it certainly was a race as far as Kennedy was concerned, because he promised we'd be on the moon, you know, within a certain period of time. And by getting to the moon, as we did, it really opened up space exploration, and monies began to flow from Congress into NASA, and it was a big deal.
Those first astronauts were Superman to all of us.
You know, I've talked to a lot of young people with kids, and it's surprising how few of them know what's going on in politics or in the nation, because they're so wrapped up with the kids, you know, and trying to put food on the table and whatnot, that it's really secondary, far down the line of interest. But I got to tell you, during the 60s, you couldn't get away from all the activities going on. So you had to balance what you heard on TV with, or what you saw on TV with what actually was happening with your relationship with your kids and whatnot.
We had 4 channels on TV. We had ABC, CBS, and NBC, and then the public broadcasting system. That was it, period. That was our choice.
So did
I
it?
think I told you the story about when President Kennedy was assassinated. During the funeral, they kept referring, the commentators kept referring to the caisson and the casket going by, and that the body of President Kennedy was being taken to Arlington Cemetery and whatnot. They kept referring to the body. And was it Steve who said,
yeah,
well, where's the head? he didn't equate the body was a corpse.
Language that at that time. After that, he knew.
And then with all the coverage on the Vietnam War, which really heated up, in the mid 60s, there was a Ford factory under construction on Michigan Avenue in Saline. And every time we passed the Ford factory, Mark would ask, is that Vietnam? Because it was under construction, and it looked like it was bombed out.
Yeah.
But the Bay of Pigs was a really scary, scary, scary time for our country. Yeah. The Russians had set up missiles in Cuba, as Kennedy said, and aimed them at the United States. And he said, get those out of there. And for 24 hours or so, we didn't know if we were going to get bombed, what was going to happen. But Paul's godparents, godfathers started digging a hole on his property that he was going to have a bomb shelter in. That's how scary it was
in
for
Ann
us.
Arbor.
It was scary.
I mean, the whole decade kind of sounds pretty scary with how much is going on. Like, did it feel like the world was coming to an end, or?
Well, it was dark and bleak and scary, from top to bottom.
The Cold War was very scary, very scary. And then came along Woodstock.
You guys went?
No.
No, we had kids, or we would have been there.
Yeah.
No, we didn't do that. I was going to school. I think I was going to school. Therese was a little embarrassed that her mother was going to college. She hated to admit that to anybody because her mother was going to college.
Yeah, that's toward the end of the 60s. Let's see. Yeah, toward the end of the 60s, I decided to change careers and go into public health. And I took a year off from work without pay. And I did have a U.S. Public Health Service grant that paid my tuition at Michigan and also gave us a stipend of, I think, $600 a month. And so we lived on that along with grandma's working as a nurse at the time. So
And we ate a lot of mackerel.
Mackerel.
yeah, but we got through it as we got through a lot of things.
Okay, so
We haven't talked about Martin Luther King.
yeah, so was he like as big as he is now? And like, what? Yeah, was he always a celebrity?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
certainly among the blacks, but I think, he has a lot more credibility, or a lot more followers today than he did then.
Oh, he was big in my mind. And when he had that march on Washington, and when he had that march in Selma, and when he got shot, and when they had the most beautiful funeral I could have ever imagined, which we watched on TV, with the most beautiful gospel singers, the most beautiful gospel singers I've ever heard at his funeral. He was big.
Of course, he gave "I Have a Dream" speech. You've heard of that?
Oh yeah.
Maybe even read it.
Mhm.
But
Tried that
that was
out
big.
in Detroit before he ever did it in Washington, D.C. And people don't know that so
Mhm.
much. But he had a dream in Detroit before he ever had that dream in D.C. Now, working at the hospital, we had a lot of former Vietnam veterans. I worked in the intensive care unit, and we always said, if it doesn't kill you, it sure grows you up fast. But a lot of them were having a lot of trouble, and the Vietnam veterans came back, and people shunned them because a lot of people were opposed to the war, and so they were opposed to these poor guys, poor young men who were drafted,
Right.
and the other young men were going to racing off to Canada, or going. At our hospital, we had two young men who had gone to Chicago to talk to the Quakers, who gave them help with what to say in order to get, what did they call that? Not disposition.
Conscientious objector.
Yeah, we had conscientious survivor, conscientious something or others.
Objector.
Objector.
Yeah.
Yeah, working at the hospital. They were wonderful young men, but they had gotten help from the Quakers in order to figure out how to plead their case. But there were a lot of people that went, a lot of young men that went to Canada, and it's kind of hard to blame them.
And I have to confess, I thought of a Canada trip for ourselves when your dad was getting within a couple of years of being drafted.
Yeah, I know. Was it as unpopular as I think it is right out of the gate, or was it not until like the draft started where it started getting?
The draft had been going on ever since World War II.
Oh, so it was just a
Even
thing.
World War I, there was a draft. So the draft wasn't new at all.
Okay.
Not at all. And I think the draft was there even when there wasn't any war, which seems impossible that there wasn't any war. In these days, we're always at war,
Mhm.
it seems like. But so I think it was, Vietnam started as a trickle and more, and it grew and it grew and it grew, and it just got so big and so out of hand. But it started little, and it kind of crept up on us all.
Mhm.
And the same way that the objection to the war started as a trickle and grew and grew and grew and grew.
It just festered for, that war went from 55 to 75.
What?
The Vietnam War.
What?
Yes.
Oh my.
But we didn't enter it until 1965. But before that,
Oh.
Yeah, like the French were fighting in there or something.
oh,
right?
everybody was fighting in there.
Yeah.
So it was, it just festered and festered and festered.
It looks like Grandma's reading something.
Okay, I think the major things that I can decipher from my writing, I think we've talked about.
Go back to the moon landing. Do you remember that day? Were you gathered around the TV watching?
Oh, boy. Did we ever? What was the date of that? Do you remember?
No.
Oh, well, we just, whatever date it was, we were glued to the TV, believe us. And
Was there like a countdown and everything?
oh
Getting ready?
yes,
Yeah.
you know, we could see the lander. What was it called? Well, when they landed, we we just held our breaths, and when Neil Armstrong
Planted the flag.
stepped out and planted the flag and said, "One step for
One small step for a man, a giant step
for mankind."
mankind. And then he planted the American flag.
And then I worried, my gosh, what if we can't get him back here?
Yeah, I know.
What's he gonna do? That'd be an awful place to stay.
Yep.
I'm sure that their wives must have felt that way always. I mean, there was always the countdowns that they had were always the countdowns to liftoff. And actually, Grandpa and I happened to be in Florida at the time of one liftoff. But it was later. It was 70. It was in the 80s actually. And it was surreal. It was amazing. It was supposed to be around 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and we thought, well, let's go over there and watch it. And at 3 a.m. and they're still partying in all their cars, and they're tailgating and everything, and singing songs, and we're still waiting. And I think they finally did get off about 3 a.m., but it was very much worth the wait to watch.
Yep.
Liftoff. And it was like a huge swelling on the highway back from Cape Canaveral. It was called Cape Canaveral, and then it became Cape Kennedy, I think.
Well, I think we're supposed to land on Mars in 4 or 6 years or something like that. So I might get to experience this.
How do you feel about that?
Oh, I'm excited. I'm all about
Are
it.
you?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Would you go to Mars if you had the chance?
Maybe when I'm your age. There's no reason to want to go to Mars because it's just not a nice place to be, but it's cool that we can go there just to say we did it.
we're so good with robotics. I don't think we need to go ourselves. I think the robotics can go and send back all the information we need.
It takes an awful long time to get there.
Yep. And back. But yeah.
And back, maybe. So, well, with the kids, our kids during the 60s, I think they learned a lot, were treated well, enjoyed themselves, and didn't get weighed down by all this crap that was on TV.
Yeah, luckily they were young enough. They didn't really understand the gravity of everything that was happening, right?
Yeah, that's true.
No, I think, we took them to, as I said before, we took them to everything that was free. We took them to all the musicals we could. We took them to the barns. I took them to the barns whenever they had days off from school. And they really loved going to the barns. And we picked up every wild cat that we found and kept it in our house for a day or two, and then dropped it off at the barn. And one we called Blackie. And Grandpa took the kids out to visit Blackie at the barns. And he looked, and there were about 8 black cats out there. So, and the parakeet we had just would fly by and these little bitty kitten cats that were just wild cats. They'd just try so hard to catch that parakeet.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so one more world event before we talk about the other part of the 60s, which is much more fun to talk about. But do you remember the giant famine in China that killed like 30 million people? Was that a notable thing in America? No?
Well, we have friends from China.
Communist
He's a
China.
university professor, and they have told us horrendous stories about that,
Mhm.
about the famine and the what he had to eat as a kid and whatnot. But we weren't really zeroed in on that during the period of it.
Yeah, there's enough going on in America. Okay, so how about the fun culture of the 60s? So we can start with the Beatles. Obviously, they're probably the biggest thing. But
Oh
like,
my goodness.
right? So what was it like when, because they basically came out in the 60s, right? So do you remember when their first hit happened, and was it like this brand new thing that was just invented, like this pop music, or what was it like?
Well, I I wasn't a Beatle fan. I thought they looked strange. They acted strange. The lyrics, I'm not a lyrics person either, but what lyrics I heard didn't make sense to me. And our next door neighbor was probably about 12 years old, and she had Beatle music on all the time, and I probably wouldn't know any of those tunes unless I heard her playing them.
Really took note of the Beatles was the first time they came to the United States, and they were on the Ed Sullivan's program.
Mhm.
And Ed Sullivan introduced the Beatles, and they played Hey Jude, and it went on and on and on. And I said, I like that. I like that.
Well, Grandma's more of a fan than I am, for sure. But there are some, that we play today that I can relate to and I like. So
Some Beatle music.
Beatle music.
Was there any other like, because in my mind it was what's that? I don't know, maybe like 15 minutes. Yeah. The 60s seemed to be like when, maybe it started a little bit in the 50s, but just kind of like when this statement kind of might make some people mad, but it's like when culture started getting good, I want to say. Like, there just started becoming like this explosion of different types of music and movies and shows and whatever else you want to call it. Did it feel that way, like when it was going on? Like, did you realize what was happening in the moment?
Can you answer that?
Well, I know that
No.
I was around the early 70s when I saw the first time I saw any woman undressed in a movie. How's that for culture?
Yeah. We our decade was the 50s, and it was a wonderful decade.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was kind of slow and contained, and even had waltzes and still big band music, and then as a senior in college, I think as a junior or senior in college, when rock and roll really took over, and that was hard to adapt to because it really, you had to have a metabolism to fit it, and I didn't have it.
Rock and roll was a lot better than hard rock. I mean, when it started getting pretty hard, then it kind of began to turn me off.
What is an example of a hard rock musician back then?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. But I mean, Rock Around the Clock Oh, what's not to like about that? That was the first really,
Mhm.
rock and roll song, and the American Bandstand was fun. Have you ever heard of the American Bandstand?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, the American Bandstand would play soft rock, but never any hard rock.
Mhm.
I think the first solo dance I did was to the twist.
You know the twist?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, we were good with the twist.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, as the 60s went on and people, what was it? What was that happened in New York? What was that? The big deal. You just mentioned it.
Woodstock.
Woodstock, yeah. That kind of started a whole,
Well, that was the drug culture.
the drug culture going, and people kind of, peeled off in different cliques and whatnot, depending upon their interests. Uh, it was in 1968, I think, that I grew a beard, and for the first time, people with other beards and whatnot would talk to me. They'd never talked to me before.
What does
But
that mean?
all of a sudden, I was okay.
No.
So, other than that, we've moved here, and it was kind of quiet times after we came here, I think.
I started night school in with two other friends, well, actually three, and depending on whether or not we had concurrent or coordinated classes, we would drive to Eastern Michigan University for night classes. Michigan State University didn't have any program at all for registered nurses to get their bachelor's degree. And we moved here in '69, and I was thrilled about the fact that I could go to Michigan State University. The first year here, we didn't, of course, have any spare money because we hadn't been able to sell our house in Saline. And so I worked that first year and didn't even think about taking any classes. And then by 1973, I got my bachelor's degree and continued working, and then started working on my master's degree in physiology, which I got in '78. And then went back to teaching again. I taught at MSU in between the bachelor's and the master's degrees. And then I went back as an assistant professor and worked there for a year into medical school. Oh yeah, I taught at LCC too. I taught anatomy, physiology, and pharmacology there. So if I were married to the President of the United States, you would never dare call me anything but Dr. Lyon. But I'm just, I've been retired for 8 years now, and I'm just Carrie Lyon to everybody. And in fact, Jim found another Carrie Lyon in the computer today.
Yes, we're over in vet med. She spells her first name Cari.
Oh.
And that's a little ironic because during my master's degree in physiology, I had to go over when they were euthanizing horses. I would go over to vet med and I would wait until the horse was dead, and then I would harvest the not the carotid artery, the jugular vein from the horses, and bring it back and put it into a pressurized box and a physiological solution and see how it behaved under pressure, different pressure situations. So I spent a lot of time over there in vet med. In fact, I was called one time by a professor to come over and please harvest this jugular vein of a giraffe.
Oh, did it
And
talk
I,
over?
and I laughed at him and told him he was just joking with me. Don't joke me. And oh no, this is real. No, you're kidding me. And it wasn't till maybe a week later that I found out that they really did have a giraffe that they wanted me to study its jugular vein.
Every time going back a little bit, Grandma talked about all these free plays and special opportunities that we found here at the university, and we would call down, or she'd call down and always invite you kids, Matt, Michelle, to come up, to go to these with us. And your mom would answer the phone and said, Matt, do you want to go up? You want to go up to Grandma and Grandpa's and see this particular show or activity? And you say,
Sounds like me.
Did you know about what it was?
I don't want to do that. That happened at least 3 times that I can recall.
That was really special going into the Capitol building here in Lansing and watching 1776 and 1976. Sitting up in the balcony and watching the play go on down below. But or when we went to see Midsummer Night's Dream, set down by the Red Cedar River, and Midsummer Night's Dream is a wonderful Shakespearean play. So we really did enjoy them, and I think that as the kids were growing up, they did enjoy them.
Cool. Well, you got anything else? I think that it's be good to kind of wrap it up there, and we can say it's a good decade. We can save 70s stuff for next time.
That's wonderful. I think you've done a beautiful job. Thank you so much. And you say hello to everybody for us.
Oh, well, how are you guys doing? You trying to avoid boredom as best as possible?
Oh, I'm just getting fat and lazy.
Oh, did you guys get in line for the vaccine?
Yeah, we're scheduled for the 2nd and 24th of February.
Cool.
And it worked out quite nicely because I went to an outdoor exercise class and into November, and I really did a number on my shoulder, my surgical shoulder, the one that had rotator cuff surgery. And I just happened to have an appointment with my rheumatologist. And I said, all I do is sit there all day long with ice on it. And he said, we're going to give you a steroid shot. So he gave me a steroid shot in my gluteus maximus. You know where that is, right?
Right in the butt.
Yeah, exactly. And then after he gave it to me, he said, now you don't get any vaccinations.
Right.
Because it won't take because you've had a steroid shot. And I thought, oh, geez, I can't, I'm not going to be able to get a COVID vaccination, even if I could, but we couldn't get one until February 2nd. So that worked out perfectly. And you've heard of Denny Yamamoto.
Yep.
Denny's gotten his. His are all done.
Cool. Hey, getting there.